Basically, when we think about a crowd of people solving a problem, we expect it to act like a supercomputer. You know, you link enough minds together, individual biases cancel out, and, well, the group naturally points to the best possible answer. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Thanks. And yeah, it's the whole wisdom of the masses concept scaled up. We instinctively trust the consensus. But looking at some of the most pivotal moments in history, that supercomputer completely crashes.
Right, and we're looking at a scenario today where that consensus is honestly terrifying. We are diving into a stack of sources comparing modern crowd psychology with, well, the ancient biblical account of Matthew 27.
Analyzing the exact moment collective intelligence just devolves into collective madness.
Exactly. And the setup here is pure chaos. I mean, to understand the crowd, we first have to look at the individuals involved right before this infamous trial.
Take Judas, for example. Sources highlight that after betraying Jesus, he is consumed by this intense individual guilt. He tries to return his 30 pieces of silver to the religious leaders.
Saying he betrayed innocent blood.
Yeah, and their response is essentially like, not our problem.
Wow. So Judas, who is completely isolated and crushed by his own conscience, throws the money into the temple and hangs himself.
And the priests then take that blood money and buy a potter's field.
Fulfilling a prophecy for what becomes known as the field of blood. But look at Judas here. He's isolated. His conscience is just tearing him apart.
Right, but then look at the religious leaders and soon the crowd itself. When they act as a group, that individual guilt just vanishes.
They're completely insulated by the mob.
That insulation is the key mechanism of crowd psychology. When people merge into a mass, anonymity strips away personal accountability. The leaders can calculate a man's execution without, feeling the personal sting of murder.
And in the middle of this psychological breakdown is Jesus. He's standing before the Roman governor, Pilate, facing execution, and he remains completely silent.
Yeah, he doesn't say a word.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like Jesus is the calm eye of a hurricane, while absolute chaos swirls around him. He's completely still, zero pressure, while the crowd acts as the destructive eye wall.
Spinning faster and faster on the energy of their leaders until logic is entirely ripped apart. And the eye wall of that hurricane is exactly what Pilate runs into.
He actually tries to release Jesus, right?
He does. He recognizes that the religious leaders handed him over out of sheer envy. Plus, Pilate receives a stark warning from his wife.
Oh, right. She had a dream.
Exactly. She suffered a terrible dream about this, quote, righteous man, and begs him not to get involved.
So Pilate is looking for an escape hatch. He relies on a festival custom to release one prisoner, and he offers the crowd a stark choice. Release Jesus or release a notorious, infamous prisoner named Barabbas.
But the religious leaders actively infect the crowd with their agenda. They persuade the masses to demand Barabbas' release and to crucify Jesus.
Pilate sees a riot brewing, realizes logic has failed, and literally washes his hands in front of the mob,
declaring himself innocent of the man's blood. Which leads to this chilling moment in verse 25. The crowd shouts back, "His blood be on us and on our children."
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does a crowd get to that point? I have a hard time believing thousands of people just suddenly lost their minds without the threat of the religious authorities breathing down their necks.
It is definitely a massive shift.
Right, so are the sources suggesting that crowds are inherently dangerous, or just that the wisdom of the masses has a massive blind spot when faced with intense social pressure?
Well, the reflection source argues it's a fundamental flaw in how crowds operate when a specific element is removed. The author traces the term collective intelligence back to an entomologist observing ant colonies.
Ants. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The theory evolved to suggest human crowds possess superior intellectual power. But the source argues that without a higher moral grounding, which this text identifies as God, collective intelligence inevitably fails.
It devolves into collective madness because the mechanism relies on individual consciences acting as a check and balance against the mob.
Exactly. Once a group ignores a higher moral truth, social pressure overrides the individual conscience entirely. They stop being rational beings analyzing facts and become a contagion of emotion.
A contagion of emotion?
Yeah. The author points out the terrifying irony of God's chosen people irrationally shouting for God to be crucified. The crowd provides an illusion of righteousness simply because everyone else is shouting the exact same thing.
So whether you view this through the lens of theology or strictly as an extreme case study in crowd psychology, the breakdown of that supercomputer serves as a stark warning for you, our listener.
The sources challenge you to examine your own environment. Where in your life are you tempted to stay silent or compromise your convictions simply because of pressure from the crowd?
Yeah, what does it look like today to have the courage to stand apart, even when the mob is demanding compliance?
It's a tough question, but crucial.
Absolutely. So I'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. If collective intelligence can so easily flip into irrational collective madness the moment moral grounding is ignored, how can any society truly know if they are being led by collective wisdom or just blindly following the loudest voices in the room?